program. Once again, we got Senator Scott Flippo with us on the phone. Senator Flippo, thanks for calling back in, sir.
Paul, good afternoon. Happy to be with you all this afternoon.
Absolutely. So how have you been, first of all? I mean, these special sessions, there's been a lot of them. They're over. How have you been?
Hey, listen, aside from, the general public at large in Arkansas, nobody's happier that we're out of session than I am. There's a quote, and I forget who to attribute it to, that says, neither your pocketbook or your property are safe when the legislature is in session. So I think, vast majority of Arkansans are breathing a big sigh of relief, and I join them.
Yeah, you're exactly right. There's a commenter on our Facebook page with some of these, news about different people getting different jobs, and he said, I knew every time I drive by that big white building when I go to work, he said, my wallet starts to kind of, fly out of my pants, and I have to roll my windows up in order to keep it from, just getting sucked to the building. And so I think that's great. You are, everybody in Arkansas is first that session is over because you guys can do less damage. And then you are like a close second, Scott Flippo.
I'm a very, very close second. And so I can appreciate where Arkansans are at, because it wasn't too long ago I was sitting there on the outside looking in, just pulling my hair out, and I'm still pulling my hair out, but I guess I'm on the inside looking out.
Yeah, well, I know you certainly have the conservative voting record to stand by, and I know your folks in District 17 are proud of that.
I hope so. I like to think they are, Paul. I appreciate that. I try to remember that I serve at the pleasure of the people and not anybody else, and so that's something that I always do my best to remember.
Okay, so we're talking with Senator Scott Flippo, and so kind of in line with this, we're relieved that the sessions are over, and who knows, there may be more. You guys have got a big session, a general session coming up in January of this next year. So
yes.
What are some of your thoughts on? I mean, I remember sitting in the House gallery. And there's that time kind of late in the session where they start reading the reports that they got back from the governor that, HB whatever is now Act this. And it just goes on. And the number of bills that they pass is quite a lot. What do you think about the number of bills that go through?
Paul, I think we pass way too many laws down there. And I'll be honest with you, I have talked to a wide variety of people across my district, and indeed probably across this state, from the left end of the spectrum to the right end of the spectrum. And it might surprise some to know that one of the things that I can generally get a very consistent agreement on is I think that too many laws come out of Little Rock, and that we ought to reduce the number of bills that a legislator can run in any given session, and try to slow the train down a little bit. And that appeals to Democrats, that appeals to conservatives, and to everybody in between that spectrum. I think probably the only place that might not sound like a good idea is going to be in Little Rock.
Yeah, you're going to definitely there'll be some pushback on that, because they.
Absolutely. You think as a legislator, a lot of your clout and influence comes from the fact that you can run any number of bills, and and it's not as I should preface this to say that it's not as straightforward as that. Certainly, if you're going to repeal a law, you've got to run a bill to repeal a law. So you got to take things like that in consideration, and one of the things that you try to look at the unintended consequences. And so one thing that I would not want to see happen is for every bill to be 800 pages and have 500 different things in it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So if you were that would be a danger. If you were limited to X number of bills per legislator, then the bills would just get really, really long. That would be a danger for sure.
Absolutely. And so in the spirit of the laws, I'm not trying to trade. Let's shave off 500 bills that we've run in this session, and now let's just make, all the other ones that we do run 3 times as long. So, I want to try to keep in spirit with what the intent would be, and it's in the very preliminary process. I'm just visiting with some of my colleagues. I haven't even begun to get the bill drafted. But from what I'm hearing from people on the ground, which is people that we work for, they like it. And I think as a conservative, when you start talking about a less government, a more efficient government, one of the greatest ways to get to less government is to have fewer laws.
Yeah.
And certainly it gives you the opportunity as a legislator to become more knowledgeable and more aware about all the things that are coming down the pikeway. I'll be honest with you, and I don't know who all would go on record admitting it, but I didn't read every single bill. There was over 1,400 of them. I read every one that came through the committees that I sat on. But there's so many bills and so many things flying at you that it's almost impossible to keep up on every single thing, which I think does a disservice, to the state at large. And it's not that it's always a lot of bad bills that come out. It's a lot of mediocre laws that we pass. They're not great. They're not horrible.
Mm-hmm.
And in which case, why do we have to have them all?
That's a really good point. Yeah, and also, I mean, because I've seen this firsthand just from talking to some of you guys. When there was a bill floated out there, what's it going to do? I really appreciate your honesty, because if you're looking at 1,400 bills, I mean, that is a lot of reading. So instead, you end up having to trust your colleagues. And when we vote for people to go down there and represent us, we go down there, we send them down there to represent us. Or and so not necessarily, well, I'm just going to trust this guy from a different district that's representing completely different people. You
bet. And and that's the hard thing, is that I think the vast majority of people try to, certainly I do, is committees is where you go to kill bad bills. And there's a really good chance that if you're a Republican and you run a bill and it gets out of committee, that it's going to pass if it gets before the entire floor. And in order to encourage more debate, more back and forth, more discussion on these bills, the first thing that's got to be predicated with is you have to have a lesser number of them, because you cannot get through them all in the time frames that we're going to be down there. And I don't think the sky's going to fall and the sun will quit shining if we pass, a third or a half amount of the number of bills down there that we are right now. I think last year we signed in over 1,200 new laws into, we signed into law over 1,200 laws. I like to think, what would happen if it was 700 or 800? What would be the noticeable difference that we would see today?
Yeah. Well, I think generally you would obviously see a difference. And if you were limited in how many laws per legislator you could sponsor or you could run, that all of a sudden makes, I don't know if you remember the show, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, but you had 3 lifelines, and those were very valuable parts of the. You had to be very intentional. This would make, in my opinion, legislators very intentional with what they wanted to support, what they wanted to get behind.
Yes.
And it would kind of stop maybe some of the, well, so and so, he'll run this bill because we need him to. Well, maybe not. Maybe he won't.
Well, is it going to stop every bit of that? No. Would it curb it? I believe it will. Mm-hmm. And so certainly I would think that it would be a step in the right direction.
Yeah.
Which anybody that has concerns about a runaway government and about an ever-growing government, I think they would share that concern. So it's not about immediately getting to where we'd like to be. It's about taking a step in the right direction.
Yeah, and I agree.
I think that's what something of this would do.
I agree with you, folks. We're talking with Senator Scott Flippo, who's a senator from District 17. You mentioned earlier that this would just kind of slow things down. One of the things that I believe would slow things down as well, unless you guys spent the money on the technology, which I would still be for, honestly, because of just the transparency aspect. But you know me, Scott, I'm a huge proponent of recording all committee votes. You said so yourself. That's where the real fight is. When it gets out of committee, it's most likely gonna pass. So talk a little bit about. I think recording all committee votes would also kind of slow the process down, make it more intentional, because we're all having to go on record. And, I mean, that's one of my biggest pet peeves. What are your thoughts on recording committee votes?
Yeah, I have no problem recording committee votes. This is something where, again, is anybody can go in there and sit in any one of these committee meetings. There's always, the press is always in there. But as far as recording the vote, and what you're talking about is that a lot of times it'll be a voice vote. So we'll just go yay or nay, and the chair will determine whether the yays have it or the nays have it. You can do a roll call, which is where you have to go out and you get called out by name and you have to vote. Your vote is recorded as your vote, and that goes on the record. And, the benefit in that is that you're absolutely going to be more aware of what of the vote you're getting ready to make. If you know that there's going to be some pushback from your constituents, or that you might believe that it's mediocre legislation, you're going to think twice before you go down as a yes vote, naturally. And so, one of the hard things in government, and it's not just government, I think it's in life and business, is whenever you ask somebody, why is it done this way, they usually push back with, because that's the way that it's always been done. Boy, that's frustrating.
Yeah, it certainly is, especially since what's always been done was we used to elect Democrats all the time, you know? So
You bet.
I would love to see some institutional changes in the way things done, not just letter changes.
And it's not just paying lip service to these changes or talking about conservatism or less government, but doing things that are actually implementing it. I think most people or most conservatives can appreciate that you're just not going to do a 180 over the course of a year or a general session, that it takes time, but they want to see Republicans working towards those ends.
Yeah.
And we have got to show a contrast between us and the Democrats. And it's not just about what we're against, but what we stand for and why we stand for it. And this is something where right now I think conservatives and Republicans, we still have ground to cover.
Mm-hmm.
We're making headway, but the one thing is that it's easy sometimes in Little Rock just to find yourself almost dangling on the edge of the cliff. You think that you go from the right side of things over to the gray area, and you don't notice that you're in the gray area. And then you blink, and you're on the edge of the cliff. So I think, to me, is, spending the necessary time in Little Rock and then getting back home, so to my district, back to my hometown of Mountain Home, and visiting with people. Hey, that keeps my ear to the ground. That lets me know what's on the minds of my constituents, what's important to them, not just important to the people of Little Rock. People in Little Rock got enough representation down there. And I'm not talking about the people that live within Little Rock. I'm talking about all the people in the Capitol and that hover around the Capitol. There's plenty of people representing their interests. There's plenty of people representing the interests of big business. We need people that are going to be down there representing the interest of your average Arkansan.
Yeah.
Those are the folks that are getting the pinch. Those are the folks that are getting worked over. And those are the folks that we need to be standing up for.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you are exactly right, and I feel like it. When we look at the special interest situation down there, it does seem like an uphill battle. However, you're good to go back home and spend because I feel like the majority of Arkansans, we're against the stuff. We're against the majority of the stuff that's going on down in Little Rock, the special interest culture and all that stuff. A lot of people, though, don't know the inside baseball. A lot of people don't know, Scott.
Sure.
That you
because
that
we
all
have lives.
Yeah. Go ahead.
They've got businesses, they've got families, they have jobs, they have hobbies, and it's only just a few thousand people probably in this state that pay detailed, close attention to the daily goings-on that's going on down in Little Rock. And I like to tell people that when I first got to the Senate, I would always be concerned when I went out and gave a speech. I would think, well, how did I come across? Did I come across good? Did I come across bad? And as time began to go, to pass me by, I became less and less concerned with, how I came across being the light of good or bad. And I said to myself, do I come across as honest? And that's the main objective for me as I visit with people is I don't necessarily think they have to agree with me, but I want them to know that when I vote on an issue, when I say no to something, or if I say yes to something, it's not because I'm an obstructionist or a yes man. If there's going to be specific reasons of why I did support this or oppose that, and Arkansas Works would be a good example in my opposition there, and I got thousands of calls and emails about that. And for the ones that I was able to get back to, probably 8 out of 10 calls that I would get that would be, encouraging me to support it. Originally, they would just think I was a heartless individual that had no concern for the less fortunate. And by the time I got off the phone with them, I could at least get them to see that at a minimum, there's two sides to any argument. And this was a big policy initiative here in Arkansas, and I believe it was bad policy. But, we water things down for people. In the media, in the press, and politicians, and campaigns, we condense important topics and conversations and condense them down to 30-second sound bites. And it dumbs down important conversations that elected officials should be having with their constituents. Because these are important issues and these are important times, and we need people that are in the know, not in the dark.
Senator Scott Flippo, I just want to say I did not bring up, I said you got a great voting record. I didn't bring up your opposition to Arkansas Works and how you did stand strong, and I do want to just thank you for that. And I appreciate your consistency. I appreciate that you ran a race to get, when you got elected based on your opposition to this out-of-control program.
No, I thought it was my good looks and charming personality, Paul.
Well,
but, maybe that had a little bit something to do with it.
Well, the people of your district, they certainly were engaged in the issues.
They most certainly were.
You're not going to get me to say that your good looks did anything. That's not going to happen.
You're a well-seasoned veteran, Paul.
But I do want to say this. I really believe, Scott, that you could be one of the guys when all of this, because of your consistent voting record and in the principle of this, when all this continues to get worse, which I believe it will, because they're expanding government. The government is very good at collecting the tax dollars. But they never really deliver on their promises. I think you could help us lead us out of this mess. I really do. So
and I would be happy to be, if I'm in a position to do so, I would be happy, to be a part of that, because I do believe that we are going to be heading for a mess. And the tough thing, I don't know if it's a tough thing, but something I think the Republicans and conservatives have to wrap their heads around is that sometimes making the right decision means that your life's going to get inherently more difficult in the short run before it's going to get better. And if the right decision was always the easy decision to make, we'd all make the right decision all the time. But, sometimes, yes, it's hard to say no to all this billions of dollars in quote-unquote free federal money. But to go around and talk and act as if there's nothing but upside to taking this money into expanding, welfare is illogical, in my opinion. There might be some out there. There are some out there that are going to say there's no other option. We had to do it. I don't agree with that, and I think there's another side to that argument, which is, we didn't have to do it, and we shouldn't have done it. And those are the conversations that we need to be having, that we should be having, not just in at our government at large, but within our party, because I think that disagreements and verbalizing those disagreements and talking about the policy and the substance of the policy is going to make our party stronger, not weaker. But if we keep doing the same things that we're doing and playing by the old school playbook, we're not going to be in control for long.
Senator Scott Flippo, it's been a pleasure, sir. I hope you have a great day,
pleasure.
And we will talk to you again soon.
You absolutely, Paul. I appreciate you very much. Thank you.
All right, folks, some great policy ideas from Senator Scott Flippo. Certainly love the idea that he's pursuing of limiting the amount of bills each legislator gets to run. That's a great idea, and it would go a long way to slowing that process down. You're listening to the Paul Harrell program, and we'll be back in just a second.